I'm going to hit go live. We're going to be here we go. I've hit go live. And we are live. We are live, gentlemen.
Are we?
Seth, are we? Can you see? Are we live? Are we live?
Oh, we're live.
We're live.
We're live.
Ricci, Seth, how are you, gentlemen? What an exciting time for Nikon we are living in right now. I feel like if there was a corner to be turned, we just screamed around it at about 180 with our four-wheel drive and everything going hard. What do you think, gents? Now, I just want to say up front that of the three amazing people here, well, two amazing people and me, I actually haven't seen or touched a Z9. So we are relying on you two gentlemen to share your awesome knowledge about the Z9 with your hands on. So my very first question, because of course everybody knows who you are, so introductions are unnecessary. The internet knows you. Ricci, tell me, what do you love? What do you love about the Z9? Let's start there.
So there was a question that I got asked the other day, which was, what's like that kind of go-to feature? And I feel like frames per second is great, but like the autofocus and just the ability to track like a bird in flight, like kingfishers, for me has always been a really cool thing that I've always shot, and I've always tried to shoot that with whatever camera I was using. But as much as I don't want to say it, this just makes it easier. So,
there it is. Now, am I right in understanding that you've now got the 9 modes, which is bicycle, motorcycle, people, planes, cars, blah 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 blah. I noticed in your video it includes fish and hamsters and penguins, but it'll jump between those modes. You don't have to choose a mode. You can just say everything, and then it'll jump between planes or people.
So you can just choose basically everything, but there might be some situations where you don't want it to focus on everything, right?
Yeah.
So if you're shooting sports and you've got crowds of people and you don't want it to focus on those crowds of people, you might want it to focus on like a car in the middle of the racetrack or something like that. You can say to it that you want it to ignore people. You want it to just basically focus on vehicles. You can say you want it to focus on animals, but not people. So you can have it focus on everything at the same time, or you could have it basically focus on what subject matter you want. And you can choose between animals, people, and vehicles. You can't distinguish between animals. So you couldn't say to it, I only want it to focus on cats, not birds, if that makes sense, right?
Awesome.
But
now, Seth, what's your
the actual tracking? What's up?
Say that again, buddy.
I mean, that's when you pick the actual tracking, where you actually put your square on it and you track whatever it is you want. But the strength of the Nikon autofocus system is on the fly, just hitting left or right and getting to where you want. The difference is this one will give you gray boxes on all your choices rather than like, hey, I see everything, freak out, and not know what to do. Like, it totally knows. The thing that was the most impressive to me, because I only had a day with it, which is a few hours. You still have months with it, Ricci, because you are an inside agent over here. But
there it was. Show it again. Show it again. Oh my God, I want to see it. It's live. Yeah. Everybody, all 300 of us, there's a live Z9. Now, come on, dude. Just a little tiny bit more.
Gold chain. You need a big gold chain and just hang it around your neck and walk
there
around.
It is. That's what you got to do. That's a whole line for Nikon, Z9 Bling. I think Z9 Bling is a good idea.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Actually, Nikon needs to understand that they are a cultural icon, that they could sell their t-shirts in department stores, just like Harley Davidson or Ferrari or anybody else. Like, people just want to rock like Kodak and Polaroid. You can do the same thing with Nikon. What I want to say about the Z9 off the bat, the first thing that shocked me, I'm not saying like I knew it was going to be better autofocus. I knew it was going to be fast. I knew the sponsor. It's a flagship Nikon. They pour everything into it. It's another Nikon. It's not like the rest. But the thing that shocked me was we were shooting a tennis player in our video with dense, dark sunglasses, and it stayed on her eyes, but it stayed on her eyes halfway off the frame. So let me go off the frame like here, and it stayed on her eye on the one side, even with half her face and dark sunglasses. And that's when I knew I could trust this autofocus. And I beat the hell out of this thing. When they told me there was no mechanical shutter, I was like, all right, that's it. I'm spinning in circles. I'm shooting as fast as I'm whipping this thing. I could not make any distortion happen. And I'm like, this is nuts. And what people fail to realize is once you go above 10 frames per second, 12 frames per second in almost any brand, you're doing electronic anyway. And most people stick in the higher frame rates as it is. And Nikon, I have to give them credit. they didn't just come up to par like everyone thought they were. They thought in their own direction. They thought with what they could do. They pushed their own technology. And I knew they were okay the second the R3 came out and the Nikon reps were still smiling at me. And I was like, So it was a very impressive camera. It feels very responsive. It's tough as hell. We had about a handful of pre-production units on our shoot, and they were all caked in mud and sand. They beat the hell out of these things trying to break them. You know, I talked to Joe McNally about it, and he was like, I strapped them onto a vehicle in the desert and I sandblasted them. Nothing happened. Like, they really made a pro camera, and they made a camera that's progressive, and they did it at a price point, not just shaved off, a chunk off of everybody else. This camera at this price point, in my own opinion, nobody else redefines the flagship tier, just like the A7 III did for mid-tier for the $2,000 price point. I truly believe that. I stand by it, and I cannot wait to get this camera in my hand.
Well, let's talk about price for a second. So it's been, what day is it? It's Tuesday. So it's been out, what is it? 3 or 4 days. And gents, is there anything you can share with us about how it's tracking out there sales-wise?
I mean, I'm not working as a... The feedback that I know is that it's, you know, one of our best pre-ordered cameras. So it's incredibly positive. So, you know, the pre-orders are ridiculous.
That's awesome. That's great news. That's great news. And Seth, have you heard anything around the traps?
I can say for the price that it's at, it has, I can't say much more than it's topped over a record for a pre-order sale. So what I think actually happened here, and you guys can hate me in the comments all you want. Listen, I'm a longtime Nikon guy. I don't think anyone's switching over to Nikon for this camera. I think this is the final of the D5 guys, the D4S guys, some of the D850 guys, or shooters, because there are female shooters out there, that were waiting for the camera to jump to mirrorless. And I think that's what you're seeing in these orders, are the people that were sticking with Nikon with their DSLRs going into mirrorless now. I really can't see another. I think the brands are so at each other's throat now that there is no more a question of switching over. It's more of like, you're in your ecosystem and you're now, if you switched, you switched already, you know?
So there was a lot of talk about it being a D3 moment. And of course, I'm out of the three of us, I haven't used the Z9 yet, but from what you guys are telling us and everything we've seen, and we've all consumed a lot of Z9 content now through YouTube, this is far more than a D3 moment. I mean, Nikon totally looks like they threw, I don't know, half of their, what is it, 150 millions and millions of dollars of their R&D annual budgets. Although I reckon this thing's probably been in development since a year before the Z7 came out. That'd be my guess. 4 years ago, they probably started thinking about it. They threw everything at it. And they really have, with some things like 8K 60 RAW, like that's just nuts, right? Like, isn't that, and no overheating. Dude. I mean, how is it that Canon's a company that's 5 times the size, and, you know, but Nikon's pulled this off? So they've, and I'm not throwing shade at Canon here. What I'm saying is Nikon has done an amazing job. That's what I'm trying to say here in regards to their peers.
Look, Nikon took off the gloves. They did that with the D850, and I feel like they really knocked it out with that one, and they took off the gloves on this one. But I think what actually happened is that they're just in this real sweet spot, right? Canon has done a great job with their R series, amazing cameras, and their processor might be at its limit. This is where Nikon put out their new processor, and soon Canon will put out a new processor that does more efficient and whatever. But Sony put out their Alpha 1, which is their flagship, in around January, February. And now we're waiting for the Canon flagship, which, if their non-flagship is $6,000 US, this thing's probably going to be a pretty hard access point for most people. Nikon made a choice to make their cameras accessible, starting with the Z5. They priced that thing at like $1,000 in the US. They kept the Z6 and 7 II at the same price as the originals. They didn't do a price bump for some minor upgrades. And they're showing that with the Z9, that they're just able to, and they did this, I got to give credit. I think Ricci can totally agree with me. They did this with layoffs happening, factory fires, COVID, tsunamis, the world hating everything they did. Like if they did anything, no matter what, it was like, Nikon screwed up again. Meanwhile, other brands made similar mistakes or something like that. No one thought about it at all. They got through all of that, and overnight, the Z9 has changed everybody's conversation. So this just means the 6.3, the 7.3 are going to be the real start of what the Z series could have been. And I think it took, other brands a third generation to get there as well, So they're just in this perfect spot of putting out the camera that got through the whole shot at the right time. Now everybody else has their flagships and their cameras out. They're not going to refresh for another couple of years. So, it's Nikon's minute. Let them have it.
Yep, totally agree.
I definitely agree. Like, there's been a lot of scenarios and situations where, like, Nikon gets a lot of stick for stuff, and like other companies do the same mistakes or whatever, and they no one really complains. So it happens. But I completely agree with you, Seth, that like overnight, there's like people that were like have just completely changed their minds and their opinions about what's possible with Nikon cameras. So yeah.
Well, for years, I've been talking to people that said, one, Nikon wasn't even going to exist today, and two, they simply could not do what Canon and Sony did with, say, AF, for example. And it's like, it's just code. It's just code and hardware, which everybody can write and purchase and design.
Hold on. The craziest thing about this camera, I'm saying that about everything that I'm going to say before I say it. But the craziest thing about this camera,
the no shutter,
the 120 frames per second includes autofocus.
Yeah,
they didn't shut it off to get you frame rates like that.
Yeah.
And I told Ricci when that 120 frames got slapped on the conference table, I told him, like, this is a gimmick. It's stupid. And then I shot it, and then I was like, damn it. There's a use case for it. I could totally see this as being referential. It's like shooting video, but you're able to choose your shutter speed. Whereas in video at 120, you're at the mercy of your frame rate. This was so rad to just be able to get, it's not just for making GIF images and 11 megapixels is as low res as you think. You can literally do it as a reference point for so many applications. I could see research laboratories needing something like this for a fraction of the cost of like a slow motion camera that costs a few thousand more than this does, And by the way, for the chat, if you guys have a question, just to make this easy like we did last time, type the capital Q in front of it, and we'll be able to see them out faster. So capital Q, then your question, and then we'll know you're part of QAnon and ignore you. So it'll be good.
That's a great thanks for that, Seth. I've changing channels. I did observe one spec, Ricci, which was the sensor is 52 megapixels, but we're using 45. Do we know why or what, or can we talk about that? It's just intrigued me.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, but like obviously every sensor has that. They have a total amount of pixels and they have an effective amount of pixels. I'm unsure as to why the difference between the two in a Z9 is so big. I've not seen any documentation on that, but yeah, I don't think there's any particular reason for it. It's not like it's using it for anything else. So
cool. Some secret sauce in there that maybe we'll find out about some other time, but it's pretty exciting. I have to say it's pretty exciting. There's also been a lot of noise about the dual coated piece of glass that some people were thinking was a anti-alias filter, but that's definitely not the case. Is that right?
So that's true. So there isn't an optical low pass filter on the sensor itself, if that makes sense. But there is technically like a piece of glass in front of the sensor that then contains fluorine coatings and a conductive layer that kind of helps get rid of dust and all that type of stuff. So don't feel like, one of the things that I saw is that people were concerned that because they thought it had an optical low pass filter, that it wasn't going to be as sharp as like a Z7 II or a D850. And from looking at the raw files, it looks good. So I'm not concerned.
Awesome. Well, I mean, the Z7 II is an astonishingly sharp camera. I obviously have two D850s as well. So look, if it's on the same page, that's insane considering the speed that we're talking about. So that'll be a lot of good news for people who hadn't heard that yet, because there was a bit of confusion out there in the world.
Sure.
Seth, we've got a bazillion questions. Are there any that's jumping out to you? Like they're going hard and strong.
Actually,
I'd just like to say shout out to 532 viewers we've got right now. That's astonishing. So thanks for being here, people. Great work. So, and can I also just say before you jump into that, it's 7:15 in New York. Ricci's joining us, and it's almost midnight in the UK Isles. So thank you for that. Anyway, we're all over the world here. It's pretty insane. Go, Seth. Go.
At this point, we've all seen the specs. We've all seen the YouTube reviews and all that stuff. But the one thing that, let's not beat around this. So one of the things that's happening right now is some guy out there made a thing about the buffer in the camera not being as large, and there's issues with it. But this is for any camera, depending on the card, your buffer is affected by the speed of the card. However, there is a question in the chat that's asking lossless files versus high efficiency, star versus high efficiency. I remember Ricci telling me that high efficiency star is actually you can't see the difference between that and lossless compression. Can we talk about that? Because the difference in the buffer is dramatic between lossless and high efficiency. So can we talk about the difference between that?
Yeah, so this is basically like a new format that Nikon have made, and it replaces the need for what we used to use, which was obviously a medium size and a small size RAW, right? So there used to be in D850, all that type of stuff. Loads of photographers wouldn't necessarily need to shoot at 45 megapixels. They like the idea of dropping the file size down, so they would go to a medium RAW or they would use a small RAW. The downside to that is that it would cut your resolution, you'd lose detail, and it would also be a 12-bit file as well. So in the Z9, that medium RAW and that small RAW is now gone. The only RAW options that you have is lossless compressed, high efficiency with a star, and then you just have a high efficiency mode. So all of those modes are 14-bit. There's no option that's now 12-bit. And that high efficiency, you are absolutely right, is a smaller file size. And it does mean that your buffer size is increased massively. But the key advantage is that you still get a 45 megapixel file. Now, the official kind of like response that I've seen is that the human eye can't distinguish a difference between lossless compressed and high efficiency star. How accurate that description is, I'm currently testing. So, you know, as soon as I have some really good examples to show you in not only in just sharpness and detail, but also dynamic range and stuff like that and high ISO performance, then I definitely want to show you guys. But from what I've seen so far, we could be in a situation where we don't have to shoot lossless compressed RAW anymore.
And let's face the realities. Again, we get to the point where we're like pixel peeping the absolutely not 1%, but like 1 in 10,000 difference, which it becomes just in the real world usage, which is what I am all about. It becomes irrelevant, the difference. And to see 100%. Your buffer tests, you're using the Delkin Black Stealth Bomber card, and you're getting, what was the number? Was it 600 in the high efficiency star, or you just gave up because it just kept going?
No, so like high efficiency star, I got over 1,000. I got 1,100 shots.
Insane. And you're basically crazy, talking right? Full frame, effectively full frame RAW 14-bit. Is that correct?
100%. Yeah, 45 megapixels, full frame, 14-bit. It's just high efficiency star. And I'm getting over 1,000 shots.
Insane.
Yeah, but the reality is the price of the camera having a smaller buffer is saving on the consumer, where you are able to make the choice of how much more you want to spend for that buffer based on your cards. So going forward, you will buy faster and cheaper cards, as next year we're going to see updated CF Express B cards, spoiler alert, where they're faster, which makes the rest go cheaper.
Yeah.
So what's top now will just be that much more affordable, which will give you the speeds you're looking for. But at least the consumer is able to make the choice of, here's my 5,500 US base point. Do I want to spend another 500, or do I want to spend another 800 on cards? This isn't just a $5,500 camera. This is a camera that doesn't make you buy a grip with an extra battery because your battery is killing you. It doesn't make you buy an Atomos recorder because you can't do certain video functions internally. You can do it all internally. So you're not just spending 5,500, you're not spending 8,000. And I think that's a conversation people need to start realizing about this camera and why it's so special on that end.
Yeah, amazing. And Ricci, you showed us with XQD. We can still shoot with our 9-year-old XQD. And if we use one of the other modes, you're still getting amazing performance. Just give the buffer a second, shoot for a second and a half, give it a half second rest, shoot for, it's still going crazy even with an old card. So
yeah, I mean,
great points there.
I've got loads of XQD cards, right? And I don't particularly want to all of a sudden just get rid of all those XQD cards. So there's going to be situations where I still want to use those and shoot with those. But if I know that I'm going to go and actively shoot wildlife or sports, then I should probably want a faster card to go with it, right? So it just comes down to what you're going to be shooting with. If you're shooting portraiture in a studio and you're not really firing off 20 frames per second all the time, then XQD
you're tethering anyway. You're tethering anyway.
Yeah, and if you're a sports photographer,
give me a break.
You're gonna shoot one of the efficiencies or even JPEG. So again, you can shoot 30 frames a second, I presume, 120 FPS at 11 megapixel, and the buffer will probably not, it'll handle it. So
look. We had Rod Marr, who is a top-end NFL photographer for the Seattle Seahawks, in our video. The first thing he said to me about the camera was how the buffer never fills on him. Yeah. That's a pro using this in pro situations, not talking about the buffer and giving him a problem. But all of a sudden, that's the Achilles heel because somebody on YouTube pressed the button longer than you would ever do. Yeah. I mean, it just blows my mind why we search out these things. It blows my mind. The only thing for me that's a fall point of this camera, if I had to say it at all, was the EVF. I would have liked to have seen a bump in resolution and frame rate. But that being said, I don't complain about my Z6.2 and 7.2 EVFs.
Yeah.
So I don't really care about this one either. And if that makes me save battery and money and it gets me shooting, I'm chill, bro. I'm chill.
But we've got the 3000 nits, and that's the trade-off. That's
one of those things you really have to see as well. Like I can't just saying that makes no sense, right?
Yeah.
So you really have to see that to believe how good it is, and really you don't know what you're missing in terms of brightness until you try it. Photographers shooting with sunglasses on, or wildlife photographers who shoot with both eyes open, to just be able to look through one eye and then have the other eye kind of look the same brightness. It makes a huge difference, and you just don't realize it until you see it. One of the things that often gets overlooked as well is the optics in front of the viewfinder.
Exactly.
You can have the best resolution viewfinder in the world. I've seen some material that suggests that if your optics in front of your viewfinder aren't good enough, you don't make use of that higher res. So,
well, isn't this it's ultimately a brilliant ergonomic choice yet again by Nikon, where with the glass, between your eye and the little viewfinder, and with being able to adjust the nits up to 3000, it's about reducing fatigue for the photographer. That's what it's all about, and allowing you to shoot in a more varied amount of conditions with less strain. So to me, it's the right choice. If they had to choose either way, it's the right choice from my perspective.
What I wanted to say was I shot everything. I mean, I got Alpha 1 here. I got GFX 100 here. I got every camera I got to shoot for the channel I work for, right? Just because they have these high specs doesn't mean they maintain those high specs. A lot of times these cameras drop resolution in certain modes and in the middle of things. And someone in the chat is saying the human eye can't see a difference beyond 60 hertz. That's not the conversation here. The conversation with the frame rate is, in lower light situations, your viewfinder slows down frame rates. It's not about the possibility of having 120. It's the fact that it'll slow down from 120 to 60. And that's where I feel like if I had to say there was a fall point, it's that the EVF didn't change as much. It just got brighter, which is a big deal. But then again, the extra resolution I see on other brands isn't always there for me. And it's not that distinguishable resolution wise. Frame rates may be a different story. I haven't tested this camera enough in lower light situations where I felt it. It hasn't given me an issue yet, but I don't have it in my hands enough,
Ricci, someone's asked here about ISO performance. Would we expect it to be similar to a Z7 II, or where is it landing from your thoughts?
Yeah, so ISO
and dynamic range.
ISO performance is one of those things that can change. As the camera gets developed. So, but currently it's better than Z7 II.
Right. Okay. Fabulous. And dynamic range, where does that sit in your mind?
I've not done enough tests to say that, but it's as good as, if not better than, D850 and Z70.
I'm so excited. Can you just show it to us again? Just before I wanted to see it again. Yeah, there it is. Can you do a little twirl?
Okay. Whoa. You sound like a creepy guy looking at a webcam girl right now. What is this?
Yeah, I'm looking at the Z9. What do you want me to say?
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. There it is. Hey, you've seen one. I haven't seen one.
You know what? When I held it, it was just like, oh man, we're starting something now. Like it just felt really great. There's a question here asking me about between the A1 and the Z9, which do you feel has better AF? And I think this is the biggest misconception, is that there's better, there's different. So what I saw in the Nikon gave me things that I'm more intuitive with, like switching between things. There's a lot of times that the Alpha 1, as amazing as the autofocus is, it'll just choose the back eye, and I can't go, hey, switch over unless I map a button to do something special. The fact that the Nikon just felt more intuitive to the way I would want my camera to focus, and also just be able to do that 3D tracking like on the fly like that. My guy who shoots video never talks to me about Nikon. He shoots Fuji, shoots Sony, shoots Lumix. And then he tried the Z9 and he was like, I never had to take my face off the EVF. I didn't have to touch the screen. I was always in it, and I was able to use the autofocus like that. That plus ProRes, he was like, get me a Z9. I've never heard him in my whole career. I've worked with this guy for 2 decades, ever talk about Nikon. So I was like, something just happened here.
Yeah. And can you, what do we know about the XP 7? We know it's 10 times faster. Is that correct? Is that the Z? Is that the originals or the 2s?
I'm not sure actually. Basically, all I was told is it's 10 times faster than what we had before.
Yeah, well, it's probably an XP 6, I suppose. But someone asked me yesterday about cores, but we don't know any of that stuff, do we? Like,
no, I mean, like that stuff's never publicized. Like Nikon, like Nikon don't ever talk about clock speeds, cores, all that type of stuff. So.
Well, clearly this is super efficient, because the fact that they can handle that 8K 60 RAW and all those other sorts of things, and it's not overheating, and that I love the fact that you showed us that the chassis is actually slightly shorter than a Z6 II with the grip on it. I mean, this camera's not that large compared to say my D3 here, which is and it's 20% smaller. So tell me how it feels in the hand. Tell me about ergonomics, because ergonomics is super important.
The one thing that struck me is obviously like D5s, D6s, because they have their separate autofocusing sensor in the bottom of the camera, their vertical grip could never really be that deep. There was always like a little notch that basically cut into the vertical grip. So this vertical grip feels like exactly the same as like the actual.
Oh, I love
grip,
it.
Right? And it does feel really good to hold. Like I said, this this might be a bit risky, because people who shoot D5s and D6 love the ergonomics of their D5s and D6s, but like I feel like this is easier to hold compared to my.
Well, it's a good point, because I've always noted that the vertical grips are different on. And you're saying it's now the same, which is just awesome.
It's the same. It basically feels like the exact same grip.
I love that. I'm so excited.
So can I just talk about what I said to you guys before we went live, where people were talking about that dead space on the Z9 over here and how that's like real estate for buttons. And in my opinion, those buttons over here take my finger off the shutter, and anything I can do to not take my finger off the shutter, like having my custom buttons here, like the Z9 does, is a huge, huge benefit to me, especially for sports guys that are constantly on edge looking to shoot. So anything I can do not to take my finger off that shutter. So I don't care if there's anything over here, as long as I have the buttons I need where I need them,
I just wanted to say thanks to Max C. He's written, Ricci and Seth, you guys got to put the word in for Matt with Nikon, because I've been so optimistic and positive. Thanks, Max.
No, there's only so many of them. I need them all.
No, fair enough. You need one for each hand and your feet as well. I get that. So do we know anything about Atomos Ninjas, the new Ninja Plus? And that's an 8K recorder. I mean, I know we don't kind of even need it, but do we know anything about whether that's going to work? I presume it would work, would it?
Yeah, I mean, you can use an external recorder if you want to, but the Z9 is fundamentally designed to do most of its work internally to the memory cards.
Yeah.
There are actually some video modes that you can't record externally. They have to go to a card.
Yeah, cool.
But there are some, the vast majority of things, if you wanted to use it through an external recorder, then you can do.
How exciting. I've just seen someone's asked whether you've used the 500 PF on the Z9. Oh, he's got it there. Look at him go. Look at him go. There it is.
This lens travels everywhere with me. Like this lens.
Do you bring a truck full of stuff with you wherever you go?
I'm in a hotel at the moment. So if anyone wonders why my background looks so strange, I'm in a hotel. But I'm out shooting. We're doing some landscape stuff, but I take this everywhere just in case I see some like good wildlife stuff. So
he's in an undisclosed location in Latvia somewhere. Yeah. He's hunting Santa Claus. Is that right?
Maybe.
In a good way, not in a bad way, not as in for photography purposes.
He's like a cartoon character, just pulls things out of off frame and they're just like in frame. But here we go. One. Look at this. There you go.
Oh my God. Is that the 100-400? Oh,
that is, yeah.
We'll have to change channels to that. How do you feel about that?
Karen, Karen, I used it with Pro Photo strobes. There's no difference between anything else. So I'm not sure what you were trying to get there. TTL was clean and everything worked great. I just want to talk about the battery life for a second, because a lot of cameras I'm using right now are draining battery left and right. But this thing all day, it didn't even move down a shard of the battery. And shooting video all day, we didn't even hit half battery life. So, I mean, it's just amazing that it's that efficient and the battery is that good. And someone asked about through the USB port. Yeah, you can actually charge through the USB port like most cameras are these days. And with the newer battery, you can plug in for AC power with the what is it? The 118, the 18D?
D, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, dude, you're in it. I don't know, man. I feel like they just didn't do anything stupid on this camera. Like, I just feel like if you told me this camera was $6,500 flagship price, I'd have been like, well, it's 10 frames a second below this, it's whatever that. But they were legit like, no, let's get this in people's hands. They've been waiting for it. And I think that's kind of like Nikon's new thing, is they haven't priced anything crazy. Like I said before, nothing's been bananas. All their lenses have been like $1,000 or under for like something to get you going. Then their premium lenses have been 25 to $3,000. And now we're looking at 400 millimeter f2.8 coming with a teleconverter built in, like a psychotic design that I can't even imagine what kind of a pickup truck you have to carry this thing in, and a 600 millimeter coming down the line.
That 400 millimeter 2.8 looks amazing. So like you have to think that it's a 400 2.8 with a 1.4 times tele built in. So it gives you a 560 f4, and it's like two lenses in one.
Wow.
It's a really great way of basically filling out a 400 2.8 and a 500 f4 instead of having to make an actual 500 f4, right? So
yeah, that is brilliant.
The thing that makes this camera worth all the money, no matter, they could have charged me $7,000 for it, I would have bought it just before the backlit buttons and a full-size HDMI. That's all I needed out of my cameras was backlit buttons and full-size HDMI. My backlit buttons, I'm sorry, Ricci, but my C series not having it was just killing me.
I feel your pain. I love backlit buttons on my D500, my D850. That was, the thing I missed. The thing I missed the most.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Something I haven't heard talked about very much at all is the GPS. Is there anything you want to share about the GPS units?
I've not actually used it. It does obviously have built-in GPS, and you can use this around the world if you wanted to. But yeah, I've not actually used it, so there's not too much information I can go into. Yeah,
that's cool. It's something that I will actually use, because sometimes when I'm putting up images up on my website and I'm in another country, it's like, where was I again? And it's great just to have that data, and some software will just automatically find it for you. Really? It'll just stick it on a map. So I think that's great that it's just built in. And again, for the price, go Seth, go. I can see you need to say something.
Well, someone's saying pick one Z lens to go with the Z9. It's already done. The 24-120 f4 that's out there is the most range. Let me tell you something. This is the, where is it? This is the 24-120 f4 f mount, right? I've got 6 magazine covers shot with this lens that forever every old annoying guy was telling me is a kit lens. It's amazing. And to have all that range without having to constantly swap through lenses means I'm shooting more than overthinking my glass selection while I'm doing it. This new one is sharper, smaller, has a control ring, and has half the focusing close distance that this one did. It's bananas. Nothing, if you want to have a more shallow depth of field, I get it. But as far as an all-arounder, find another lens that's 24 to 120 f4. Find another lens that doesn't stop at 105. I mean, it's so dope. And it's what is it, like $1,000 in the US, I think? It's such a, God damn it, Nikon. They just woke up. I feel like you just finally got your head together. It's killing me.
I reckon it's really tough moving from one mount to another mount. I think it's underrated how difficult that is and how hard it was to predict how long F would still have energy for. And then you have to diversify. You have to split in half your finances to put one into a new system while you're still supporting another. So really tough. And we've got to not forget that Nikon's the smallest of the three big ones. So I think they've done great personally. And that's because I run my own business. And I tell you, sometimes you have to split your cash in half and things take a little bit longer because you're trying to do 5 things at once, Anyway.
Yeah, but you know what Nikon did was they made all their lenses with video in mind, whereas a lot of brands are refreshing glass right now to stop motor noise and focus breathing. And out of the gate, Nikon made lenses that maybe weren't the flashiest thing. They didn't have all these like extra little features, but they gave you a better price point, no breathing, lighter in weight, sharp as hell. And I think they deserve more credit for it, to be honest with you.
Well, I say it as much as I possibly can. The 50mm 1.2, just every time I use it and look at the shots, I literally am just very emotional because honestly, it's the most divine lens. I can't wait for the 85 1.2. But all of the glass, everything from the 2470 f4, which was the first one I got with my Z7 kit right back at the start, not a single lens have I gone, what's wrong here? None of them. They just all have blown my mind. And when you come from F, Ricci, this is something maybe you can talk towards. Like it's quite a fundamental difference between most of the F glass. Obviously, the very most modern F glass is a different caliber, but most of the F versus Z, it's just really a massive generational shift.
There was so like quite a few years ago, Nikon went through quite a change on how they developed their lenses. So they generally were able to just develop much higher quality lenses without needing to kind of anywhere near like the same level of testing and stuff like this. They were able to model and produce high quality lenses at like a fraction of the cost. And that's when we started seeing things like the 105 1.4. That's when we, started seeing like the new 70 to 200 FL, the 400 FL,
beautiful lens,
with the 180 to 400, right? Like, all of those lenses are fantastic and they're still really good within their own right. Like the latest F mount lens, the 120 to 300 2.8, that lens is disgustingly good.
A cracker, yeah, absolutely.
But at the same time, you're absolutely right. Like all of the Z mount lenses have just been incredible. Like there isn't a lens that doesn't have very good quality. Don't get me wrong, there are lenses that don't have a fast aperture, and not all photographers like that, but like they're all sharp, they're all detailed, and they all control chromatic aberrations, all that type of stuff. And that's what people appear to want. Don't get me wrong, I know there's a lot of photographers who like the older character. I appreciate lenses with older character as well. And I think Nikon's doing that with things like the 28mm and the 40mm. So,
Yeah, well, I having used both of those more affordable entry-level lenses, they still, from my perspective, perform probably above a lot of the F lenses. And yet they're, how much are they? $299, I think, US dollars, which to me is, extremely affordable for what they deliver. So absolutely amazing. Absolutely, mate. Well, Seth, what you got for us?
That's the other thing, is that there's no caveats to the modes and speeds on the Z9 as to what glass. So there's not every brand can say that. There's always like only this series of glass, or the last like whatever works with this, or even Sony's new focus breathing compensation in camera isn't with everything. So you have to kind of look at the fine print on all these types of features. But the reality is, the Z9 and the Z series was so well thought out for a baseline that now they're standing on this really good foundation to build on. Was the Z6-1 and Z7-1 rough? Could have been better? Absolutely. I mean, I was the guy that everyone thought invented one card slot on this thing when I did the video for the for the release for Adorama. I took all the hate for this thing, and I still like the camera. I streamed with this very camera for 3 years now, the same exact camera, and everyone always asks me what camera it is. Because in the end, Nikon image quality is so good. It just took a minute for the rest of it to catch up, and now that it's here, oh my gosh, Ricci, they got to get into some like more video-oriented stuff. They've got to do their version of a C70 camera. They got to do their version of an A7S III. They've got to really look at that market. And we also need a camera that has no EVF, that's under $600, that could be a streamer, a small get into the system camera that's really low cost and easy to get into. And hey, the ZFC totally hit a market. I mean, it's sold like bananas. I mean, and bananas sell really well, if you guys didn't know.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
And there is Seth's Christmas list for 2022. They are all the things he wants, those 3 different cameras. Woo! And I'm with you. I'm right behind you. That's absolutely awesome. Now, one person has asked, because some people are interested in whether video goes to 1 or 2 slots. Is that something doesn't bother me?
Single slot. So you, in video, you can't record to 2 cards at the same time. So
that's
video.
Most machines do not do that. Now let's talk about the 100 to 400 that you have there in your hand. And I was reading about it. It's got a very special balancing mechanism in it, something that's new. Tell us about that.
Do you mean to stop it from creeping, or do you mean just like its weight?
Well, there's something that moves in the interior when you extend it, which I think tries to keep it balanced. Is that right?
Yeah. So, but like also one of the things, like especially with a lens like this, they're obviously like they either have a lock on them or it can tend to creep sometimes. This lens doesn't do that because the internals actually counter each other. So when the barrel extends, it actually pushes a pivot back upwards that kind of then keeps it in place.
It's got a counterweight.
Yeah, so Nikon basically developed like the inside of this lens to stop it from creeping. They could have just put a lock switch on it, but they over-engineered the inside to just fix something like that. And it's honestly like you can throw it around and it's not going anywhere. So
and yet there's no lock. Like that is just brilliant. Because that is a lens that's going to be out in the field so much, and lens creep is a big issue sometimes.
Exactly right. So
I also want to say in the chat, there's stuff that I know me and Ricci have NDAs on that we can't talk about, but I will say there's a lot of things being mentioned in the chat that I will say there's massive firmware is coming. And I think you'll all be shocked at what's in those firmware updates right out of the gate. So I don't want to ruin it. I don't want to get sued and I don't want to lose my job, my contracts, but there's a lot of things being mentioned in this chat that you just keep an eye on the firmware updates, because remember, nowadays, you're buying the hardware the firmware can always change inside the camera. Fuji has a firmware update that changed one of the cameras from 1080 to 4K video. That's bananas, okay? There's things that are gonna get unlocked. There's things that are gonna happen, but I'll say Nikon built a camera that I think pros can invest in for a few years and not worry about it, including a shutter that won't break.
I love that. The shutter that won't break. It's an invisible shutter that doesn't break. No, it's such a very, very brilliant idea.
One last thing, Aiko, as far as tethering information and as far as my end, these are pre-production. So tethering into like Capture One can't happen because Capture One doesn't have the information to make a profile in order to tether into it right now. So that verdict is still out, but Ricci might have software that's beta from Nikon that can tether. He's asking about the Ethernet.
They launched a new piece of software as well for tethering specifically. Which I have, which is great. It actually works really well, but it's not to the same level as like tethering in Capture One, if that makes sense.
Yeah, nothing will. Yeah. I mean, Capture One's just balls, man. But can you tether with the Ethernet? You can, just like the D5 and D4, right? You can tether with the Ethernet.
Yeah, you can still do that if you want, but you can also just tether through USB-C.
Yeah, but you don't understand. Ethernet is super long, clicks in a lock, and is cheap.
I get the benefits. Yeah,
I love the fact that Ethernet is still relevant. I mean, how long's it been around? 30 years. I just love that. and they keep making it faster. You know, we're up to the gigabit speeds or whatever it is. Is there anything you want to show us or tell us about the 100 to 400, Richie? Seeing as you have one there, probably the only one in the universe to have one live now in the world. Just think about that. Live in the world right now, you are the only one. And there can be only one. It's you.
There's not that many. I think one of the biggest questions I get is, well, one of the biggest questions I have got that I've not covered yet is the performance of this against like a 70 to 200 with a 2x teleconverter.
Yep.
So like obviously that that gives you effectively the same lens, because the 100 to 400 is a 400 f5.6. The 70 to 200 2.8 with a 2x tele is then a 400 5.6. My biggest or easiest way to respond to that is, if you are a wildlife photographer and you're using your lens mostly at 400, buy the 100 to 400. If you do a little bit of wildlife and you like the idea of a 70 to 200 2.8, and you might use it with a 2x teleconverter for 400 millimeters occasionally, then buy the 70 to 200 2.8. But realistically, the 100 to 400 is sharper at 400.
At the long end.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that would make sense. I mean, a teleconverter is always going to make a difference in the middle there.
Yeah.
There's a question in the chat that I'm actually curious. I doubt you can, but he's asked it twice about if you could plug in a hard drive to the USB for stills photography. I don't think you can tether right into a hard. No, right?
No, unfortunately not. This is actually something that I've requested for a number of years, so it's on the list, but unfortunately not. I wanted to be able to do that with the original Zeds.
John Macaulay Woods, I'm only talking about firmware for the Z9. I wasn't talking about 6.2 or 7.2. I have no idea what's coming for that. And I own those cameras. You think I'd have some interest in that? Oh my gosh, man. I'm so excited to get my hands on this thing finally. Like, this was the Nikon I was waiting for, you know? You're
excited. I tell you, I'm excited too. You've actually had a chance, my friend. Yeah. You've had a chance.
That's true. Yeah. That's true.
Do we want to talk about any of the other lenses? Like, is there anything you'd want to share with us on some of the shadows that we saw on the roadmap? We had 2 more DX lenses, which I think are going to be great for the entry level. Mm-hmm. And we also had what appears to be a 26 pancake, which full frame, I think. That looked exciting.
So obviously they're within the compact lenses. So there's like a 26 mil and a 24 millimeter DX. Which are going to be small prime lenses. 12 to 28, I'm really interested in, because I'm a huge fan of like the AFP 10 to 20, just for DX cameras. That was a great lens. So the 12 to 28 looks really promising. Still obviously waiting for the 200 to 600. I really like that 600 millimeter focal length. So it'd be interesting to see what that 200 to 600 is like. Not many people noticed that there's now a new 400. So obviously on the roadmap, there's a 400 2.8, but then there's another 400 below that.
I did not notice that either. Ooh, what's that?
So you're basically in a situation where, like, Nikon have said that there's going to be 2 400 mils, because we have a 400 2.8 and then another 400 prime. Right. And there's obviously, this isn't including like the 100 to 400. And then there's going to be a 600 prime and an 800 prime. So,
wow. So can we guess that the other 400 is going to be a 5.6 or an 8 or something, a much more entry level sort of 400 prime?
Obviously, I can't comment.
No comment. Okay, all good.
But
I'm guessing they're not making a 1.2 400, Ricci. I'm guessing they're not going to go in that.
I feel like that would be.
It'd be huge.
It would indeed. But I think it's Nikon showing that they're not just committed to like, one of each focal length, if that makes sense. They want to have multiples of 400s and the 200 to 600 and then a 600 prime, right? They want to make sure it's a fleshed out lens system.
Yeah, well, it's like the question I get asked a lot, which is, where's the 70 to 200? What is that noise? Where is the 70 to 200 f4? I've been asked for that lens since the go-get.
Yeah,
and of course that will come. That will come.
Like a lot of people would want that, because then that kind of completes that second trinity of lenses, right? Because
exactly.
The 14 to 30 f4, the 24 to 70 f4, that's kind of the only one that's missing. Not on the roadmap. I honestly have no idea if that lens exists or is coming or whatever, but it would make sense to have that as a lens that would complete that kind of second set of 3 lenses, really.
Yeah, the f4 trinity for sure. Seth, what you got for us?
So I want to talk about flash. There's a bunch of lighting questions because that's like my main thing is like, lights and stuff. So here's the thing. And I'm going to say this as a guy who put the A1 on a pedestal for having a faster flash sync of 400th of a second. This flash sync says it's 200th. I have fired pro photos at 250th and it seemed clean to me. However, having a 400th of a second flash sync is nice to have and all, but if you're going to underexpose ambient light, you're not going to do it by a half or maybe even a full stop. You're going to go to like 4,000th of a second, not 400. You're going to go to 8,000th of a second. And because of that, when I first heard about the Z9, I told Mike, I'm like, I wanted a faster flash sync, like a child. And then I realized no matter what you do, you're going to be using a faster high-speed sync situation rather than a faster shutter speed. A faster flash sync. So your faster shutter speed is going to rely on high-speed sync. That's where I think we're going forward. I don't think we're going to look at a situation where they're going to worry about flash sync with the shutter. So 200th isn't bad. That's pretty typical. 250th is nice. 400th on the A1, at first I was like, awesome. If you look at 250th versus 400th on a pretty well-lit day, it's almost indistinguishable. So I'm telling you, it really didn't matter to me. And my whole career rests on strobe, okay? I'm telling you, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. You're gonna be doing high-speed sync, so.
Awesome, good to hear.
And that's all the train.
Can we use the same Nikon ProPhoto, Seth, can we use the same Nikon ProPhoto transceiver that would work on our, great, because I have absolutely. That. I can't wait to try it out.
Yeah, no. And actually, I was shocked that the TTL worked clean right out of the gate on a pre-production model, because it's very rare that actually works on pre-production any brand. So I was pretty shocked at that. But
and what's
TTL?
When you're using that high-speed sync, how high can you go with the shutters?
I was doing high-speed sync at 2,000, but I think you can go 8,000, right? Ricci?
There you go.
Yeah.
So
8,000th of a second is your max.
So that's the answer. It's happening a different way, is what you're basically saying. It doesn't rely on just
and
the cameras
I get
now.
the concerns, like, because the concerns with like Z6 and Z7, like you can't use them silently at all with flash. And I get the concerns that you're using LED panels or flickering lights with older cameras and silent photography, like you get flickering. So I get the concerns, but that's not something I've seen. I granted I don't shoot as much flash as Seth does, but I have tested that.
Can I ask you, Ricci, about the flicker modes? Because I think this is the one thing that people are hoping for, is variable shutter rates, like Sony and the R3 now has. Does it matter?
Not from what I can see. I think there might be some situations where you might need to put in a variable shutter speed. But the way that Nikon's flicker reduction system works is that it chooses the right one for you. So you know how like in the R3, they kind of added in an auto mode where it gave you a shutter speed back. It's kind of like Nikon just does that internally, and it just gives you what it thinks is when the camera should fire and what the shutter speed should be to give you the right flicker reduction shot. It can mean that in extreme circumstances, that if you're asking the camera to fire at 20 frames per second, it might not fire at 20 frames per second to compensate for the movement in the lights. But other than that, it's, it works.
So if it's on auto, it can give you like a weird shutter speed, like the other ones, you just don't dial it in. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, it won't ever tell you that it's basically all it will tell you is it will tell you that it's the flicker symbol will flash at you, but it won't actually change and show you like your shutter speed or your frame rate or anything. That just stays the same, but it will actually change stuff in the background, like your frame rate, to match you with lights.
Huh. So in a sense, it is doing what the other cameras are doing. You just don't have manual control over it.
Yeah, you don't have a choice. It's just stopping you from getting.
it just removes the flicker. It just does it.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't have a choice.
There is no choice.
Yeah. One thing on that as well, there was a couple of videos online where people were mentioning that when you start shooting, there's a blackout and then it like doesn't black out. And like some people were saying that was the way of the camera telling you that you were firing. That's not true. That's not the case. The reason that first blackout was happening was because those cameras were in flicker. they were in flicker reduction. So if you turn flicker reduction off, you don't get that initial kind of black frame. It just fires. So there was a couple of cameras that were set up a little bit differently for different people. There was also something else as well that someone else got wrong about the I can't remember who it was, but about the not being able to change the color of the focusing boxes. The Z9 will go green in AFC. You just have to turn it on. So if you turn it on, if you turn the setting on when you're in AFC, when you're autofocus tracking, the box will go from red if it's out of focus, orange if it's struggling to get focus, and then it'll go green when it's locked, and it will stay green if it's locked on that subject as the subject's flying.
That's awesome. That's new.
Yeah, like obviously that's one of the things that loads of people asked for, like in Z6 and Z7. If you look back at a lot of like my external recordings in my video, when I lock onto a subject, it goes green and it stays green in AFC. And there was a couple of videos where it said that wasn't the case and it had to stay yellow or orange, and that's not true.
But it has to stay yellow in AFS, doesn't it?
You can go when you're in AFS, it goes green when you lock. But if you're not locked, it's red. So if you're in AFC, you can ask it to now go green.
Oh, I didn't even notice that. Wow. Yeah. I couldn't get my head around, like I couldn't stop thinking about was for the first time you're seeing gray boxes. So after years of seeing like the same autofocus, and then you start seeing gray boxes on every other thing, and you're like, wait, what's going on? Like it takes you a minute to realize. You feel like you're in a video game. You're like F14, like heads up display, like lasers everywhere. I'm like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, because like the camera, like also, you say, the camera is literally like picking up subjects in front of you, and it's like putting a gray box around them, and it's like saying, do you want to focus on this subject? Do you want to focus on this subject? Or do you want to focus on this one, right? And then you just choose the one that you want and you focus it, and it locks to that subject. It's like having that kind of like heads up display where it's just showing things in front of you, which is really cool.
Well, since the chat's asking, yes, I am selling a Gen 1 Z6 and 24-70 f4 lens. If anybody is interested, I totally am. And that's
Ricci, is there anything else you'd like to mention that you want to maybe sell to raise some funds? We're doing a live auction here right now. Bring your stuff.
And once
I'm going to hold on to my F5 though, because I just love it so much. That's not going to get sold. Yeah. Somebody asked the boot up time of the Z9. Is it pretty much instantaneous? Like by the time you
I don't know if I can show you this. So there you go.
Yep, that's instantaneous.
Yeah.
and that's basically flick and then brrr, like you can just start hammering away.
But listen to it because the thing goes up, the shield goes up.
Oh, let's listen. Oh, that's the lens cover, the sensor cover. What's the official name again? I can literally like. Oh, there it is. Look at that.
And like so like fast, they will literally this is how quickly it turns on. So if I flick the switch, it's like ready to go and then off again.
Yeah. You don't need more than that. Humans don't go any faster than that.
It's pretty quick.
It's sick, dude.
Yeah, it's just absolutely unbelievable. And you go, Seth.
I mean, I just feel like this was the right camera at the right time. I mean, we finally have dual matching CF Express B slots. We have no shutter at a point where all the other cameras made people question, do we need a mechanical shutter? Nikon was like, here you go. 8K raw ProRes internal bananas. I mean, the fact that I don't know what you couldn't do with this camera, to be honest with you. I really don't.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, oh man, they're the only ones that didn't put a data shoe in the hot shoe for like a mic or other accessories. And then I thought to myself, that's a real fail point for other cameras as far as where it could break, shorts, all the stuff like that. Plus, if you don't use it, you're paying for it. So the price would have been dictated by putting that in there. So I feel like they just did this pretty right at the right time, and they didn't price wall it so that the people who've been waiting for it in the Nikon world aren't inaccessible from it, you know? So I don't really see anything I would have been like, oh man, it would have been cool if. I'm still wondering if I can even care about 30 frames a second. I'm still wondering if I even care about that anymore. But me and Ricci were talking for like a month or two about this. And I think we just kept on questioning things, and then the details just kept adding up, and we started understanding every decision they made. At first, you're like, wait, but this camera does that, and that camera does this. But once you put it all together, and then the price, you were like, oh, you're like,
I mean, it's like an epic Swiss Army knife from my perspective, like absolutely epic. Like it covers everybody's needs, doesn't it? I mean, and then a whole lot more, because I've talked a lot about frames per second on my channel, and it's like, okay, so you've got 20 or 30, whatever, but how often, and then how quickly do you get tired of going through 10,000 photos from that day of shooting? Like, I don't know about you guys, but I just wouldn't want to be doing that all the time. Like, we're going to need AI just to go through the photos if we get any faster. Like, do we want 40? Do we want 60? Like,
that was the worst part of like me editing like shots that I've been taking with this camera over the past few months. It was just like, I don't have the time to go through these 10,000 pictures and find out which ones are the best ones.
I mean, the 120 frames per second is awesome, but and I don't know, people might use it for sports, maybe mostly or something.
I've still got 9,000 shots that I've not looked through.
Yeah. So I do really think you've got to make a choice ultimately around where's the realistic use case of people actually, you know, only 1 in 100,000 people are going to want to sit through looking through that many images all the time. Let alone the fact that you know, if you want to shoot 30 frames per second in JPEG with Nikon's awesome dynamic range and de-lighting and all that sort of stuff, there's still going to be amazing files, right? So there's still full frame. It just feels like a good balance between everything. Plus, and I'm sure you can't talk about this, but 8K 60 RAW, that's a lot of data. I feel like it could go faster at a later date if it wants, because there is so much data already passing through. But we're not going to talk about that. It's just a little theory of mine, but we won't talk about that right now. We'll wait to see what happens next year. But this camera is an absolute beast. And I can't wait to get my hands on one.
Just so the chat knows, I'll be live tomorrow on Adorama's Facebook talking to Mike Corrado of Nikon, Rod Marr, the NFL Seahawks photographer, Nikon ambassador, and Christy Odom, who does really great wildlife video, both using the Z9 for months. So if you guys want to join us on Adorama's Facebook tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern, I'll be on there. I just wanted to throw that out there because, like, I know Adorama's going to be like, why didn't you mention your stream?
Yeah, man, it's yours.
All right. First of all, Halo, if you keep on spamming, I'm going to throw you out of this chat. I'm from Brooklyn. I do not care. All right. Why not shoot uncompressed RAW? Because if the RAW file compressed gives you the same exact image quality as uncompressed, why eat up data in your cards and processing power? That's why. Can you stop spamming? Halo. Jesus, man, I'm sorry, guys. I just can't stand that stuff.
No, it's all good.
In fact, I'd time him out if I could.
How do we do that?
Sorry about that.
Anyway, I'm sure he'll stop. You've answered his question.
Ruins the chat for everybody.
I'm sure.
Anyway.
Halo, your question's been answered. Please be polite. That's what we expect here on my channel. Don't we, gentlemen?
We do.
Yeah. That's how we... There you go. We've got an okay from Halo. Yippee-ki-yay, Halo. Love your work, mister.
Is there anything in the chat that you were surprised about? I want to know, what was the most surprising thing about the Z9? Because the most surprising thing to me was that Nikon kept it secret till like 2 days before, when Nikon India decided to let everybody know about it.
Well, I wanted to say, like, the decision to go with no shutter seems to be a very, very bold decision. And I don't know whether we can talk about that much, but like, this does, I mean, Nikon's come along, and why, to me, it's more than a D3 moment is because they've come along and changed photography that we've known for 100 years, haven't they? Is this the first time ever in this class of camera that we have no photographic shutter?
For like full frame stuff, I think.
Yeah.
You know, but like, there's two ways you could look at it. Either they were developing it and they originally did have a mechanical shutter in, I don't know, but if they were developing and it had a mechanical shutter and they got to the point where, like, you know what, with this speed and the way that we can read out of this sensor, let's just ditch the mechanical shutter, save some weight, save some complications. So that could have happened. Or early on, they could have said, oh, we know that how fast this sensor is. We know how fast our processor is. From the get-go, we know that we don't need a mechanical shutter. So I reckon it would have been, you know, either one of those two scenarios.
Yeah.
but I would want to lean more towards the fact that they've built this camera from the ground up to be without a mechanical shutter.
So let's just say, and you don't have to respond, 3 or 4 years ago, they said, this is our goal. And we are going to leap the market with this one particular decision, and to have that resolve through the firestorm that they've gone through, largely via influencers, let's face it. And they did it. They've held their resolve, and they've gotten to the other end of this massive, like, it's ultimately a risk, right? Like, I see it as a risk. It was like, maybe it wouldn't work. And here they are, they've done it. So I suppose all I'm saying here is good on Nikon for years ago having the foresight to go down this path and pulling it off and delivering. Because I've sat here with people telling me that, Nikon this, Nikon that, negative. And I'm like, no, I'm sure that, they spend millions and millions and millions of dollars on R&D. Don't worry. It's just, they do it in their time. And then when it arrives, it freaking works. So just relax.
Wait.
Your D850 and your D5 is still awesome. They're only 4 years old. Relax.
Everyone needs to realize, out of the 3 top camera companies, or even 4, Nikon is the smallest company in size. There's no Nikon PlayStation, Nikon printers. There's no Nikon film that was ever made out there. No Nikon instant cameras.
No Nikon record company.
Yeah, they don't understand that Nikon literally is just a camera company that's been so stable for a century that they've made it to this point. And so in 3 years of people just not seeing what they wanted out of these cameras, that's when they counted out, because some YouTube thumbnail said, hey guys, I don't do anything but make these videos, so I'm telling you that they're going out of business 8 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago. And here we are today with leading technology that can only bleed into their next tier and generation of cameras going forward. So I just urge you to not, if there's any lesson to be had here, and I'm not trying to say that this Nikon Z9 is the end all of everything, but it's, do not pay attention to just what's being said the most out there. Pay attention to what you believe and what's in your hands, because the Z6 original was counted out. They were told that it was a non-profitable company. And then years later, people finally got them in their own hands and they started selling like crazy. The 6.2 and 7.2 were sold out forever and still are in some cases. And it's because people actually experienced them for themselves and didn't take someone's word for them on a YouTube channel. So go out there and find the cameras that have the workflow you want, have the color, the feel, the performance you want at the price you are comfortable paying, and just enjoy it. Just enjoy it, because it's not up to some YouTuber to make a video that all they care about is your click. It's up to you to want to pick up that camera at the end of the day. If you didn't want to pick it up after you put it down, no matter what the specs are, that camera did not succeed for you. And no one can tell you what's good for you.
Yeah, it's all about use case and ergonomics.
I think a lot of people don't realize that the photography industry does actually move quite slow.
Yeah.
Like, we're not in the mobile industry. We're not in this situation where, new things get 4 or 5 times faster every year. We're in a situation where, actually even companies that do release quite quickly are even starting to slow down now. There's, a lot longer and a lot more years before any real major change. And I think sometimes we just need to take a step back and think, oh, hold on a minute. Companies are working on things. They just might be working on things for 3 years or 4 years, not working on them at 6 months each time, right?
Well, I suppose my point before was, I think this is the biggest single step in the 35 millimeter wide consumer space to remove the shutter, right? So, of course, if you're going to make the single biggest step, it's probably going to take longer.
I mean, I think you've obviously got the transition from DSLR to mirrorless first.
Yeah.
And then
that was a big step, but they were still using the same mechanism. They were still using a mirror and a shutter, and all they did was put a sensor where the film plane was. This to me feels bigger. It feels bigger than that. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. But I'm agreeing with you. When you make this massive step, it's gonna take time, and you want to get it right.
You guys also have to realize, since cameras are about 2 to 3 years in development cycles. Not only are they making decisions based on what they think the market will be in 3 years, they have to make decisions based on what will the technology be accessible in 3 years, what will be relevant. There's plenty of cameras that came out that were just a little late with a spec that was a little under for where we were, and people thought that these companies were out of touch. The reality is millions of R&D went in, 2 to 3 years of R&D went in, and they still have to bring it to market whether they want to or not. And if they were to up-spec something, they probably would have needed a new processor and then built the architecture all over again in the cameras. People don't understand what it takes to bring technology to going to be at that point. I mean, look what happened. Okay, so case in point, Sony put out 4K full frame video years ago. Those batteries held up horribly and they overheated. They were still seen as progressive. Canon puts out 8K video first, and it overheated after like 15 minutes or whatever it was, or a little longer. And they were seen as a failure. Now, they thought 3 years prior to that camera coming out that 8K would be at a point where it was just seen as great to have rather than sustainable for a platform that could record for an hour or two. But they were seen as a failure when they actually were progressive. And that's all in messaging and marketing. So that camera's amazing as stills, but it was introduced at a cinema convention where all they cared about was the 8K performance, and that became the headline, when as a stills camera, it's phenomenal. So it's really sad that this is what it's come down to. And I think people need to give more insight to what goes into the development of the technology so that people can better understand what they're buying or making choices on, or even critiquing. Sorry.
No, man. I love it.
People love it.
Vince, amazing. That is ridiculously generous. Thank you so much.
Ike, thank you, Ike.
I'm slightly speechless. I thought I would change channels for a second, and of course, Ricci, let us know, because it's now after midnight. So let us know how you're traveling. I know you're a gentleman and you're very polite, but please, if you've got to get up at like 6 a.m.,
even earlier. Yeah, I'm getting up for sunrise.
Oh my Lord. Well,
oh my gosh.
You just tell us what you need. It's absolutely amazing and glorious that you're here. I just wanted to quickly touch on this, because you're such an expert in all things Nikon. This new lens here, the 18 to 140. I've been using this lens for a couple of weeks, and amazing. It's an amazing performer. And it seems to be very close to on par to the 24 to 200. And I just can't really believe that you get a package like this with a lens like this, and it's just all working. So again, we kind of talk about Nikon not caring about their customers or performing, but here they are delivering a lens like this for the entry level. And I just think this is a ridiculous kit, the ZFC and this lens.
I think we kind of mentioned this earlier, that there's a little bit of hesitancy or negativity around lenses that aren't as fast in terms of aperture, right?
Yep.
And in the past, I completely agree that no one wanted to shoot like an f6.3 lens because you couldn't use a higher ISO or the quality wasn't very good or whatever. But I think that's changed. The 24 to 200 was like a really good example of that we can rely a little bit more on higher ISOs, as higher ISO performance has got better in cameras. And like that 24 to 200 at f6.3, this 18 to 140 at f6.3 is like fantastic quality. And you're just kind of missing out if you have this reluctancy to only want to use like 1.2 lenses or f2.8 lenses or stuff like that. And like, if that's what you want to use, you can use whatever you want, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you should not look at darker lenses because they're not lenses that are not as fast, because they are still great.
But even the look of a shallower depth of field has changed, because now we can step closer to our subjects with minimum focusing distance being dropped. I mean, the 24 to 70 kit lens is like under a foot close focusing. Being able to step closer to your subject lets you cheat that shallower depth of field when you need it. So it's just, I don't know, man. Like, I also don't like a one little tiny fraction of my image in focus. I'm just not that. I shoot it, when I shoot commercially, I shoot f13 all the time. So it's like.
Seth, this is why I love you so much and why we're such a good pairing, whereas I just shoot everything wide open all the time. That's why I love a 50mm 1.2 and I shoot at 50mm 1.2. What are you doing? Hey, baby. How you doing? Don't jump through the camera. What?
Look how shallow.
I know, it's beautiful. I love it. It's glorious. But I just wanted to say that 18-140 is an amazing travel lens. I've done cityscapes at night, 4K video, shot my daughter's birthday with it just this weekend, and it performed in all situations. Pumped the camera up to 800 ISO, and I just think it's a great all-rounder lens, and it feels great on the Z50 and the ZFC. So I just wanted to throw that in there. Thank you, Wireless.
24-120, like that 24-120. I saw a couple of people like, oh, it's a constant f4. Like some people were expecting it to be like a 2.8 or whatever. And I'm just like,
be big.
Exactly, it's gonna be much bigger. The size is gonna be different.
No.
Like, don't feel like the quality is gonna be any worse. The quality is fantastic.
I want that lens. Let them make the 2.8 version. Shut up. I want that lens. I'll pay $3,000 for that lens if it's 2.8. I will drop 3Gs right now if that thing is 2.8. I don't care how much bigger it gets.
It'll weigh 2.5 kilos, Seth. I don't know what that is in pounds.
What is that in pounds?
Yeah,
I don't know what that means.
Someone tell us. Do a quick conversion for us. Somebody.
No, but
lots.
Is that a plastic mount though? The 18 DX, is that 18? Is that a plastic mount?
I think it is. Let me have a quick look. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
But look, that stuff doesn't bother me. Composite plastics are they make spaceships out of them and build cars with them and all sorts of stuff. So it doesn't bother me at all.
The ethos of that lens was light, small, get it to someone who travels with. It's not going to go into like, the hardcore press photography out there.
It's ridiculously light. The whole kit is just so easy.
Yeah. The lens technology is nuts. People, I know you both remember when the 1.8s came out, everybody was like, oh, why are they 1.8s? You promised us 1.2s. And I'm like, they gave you starter lenses for a new system under $1,000, and 1.8 is shallow. This is 1.8. Are you kidding me?
I cannot go on enough about the fact that these Z 1.8s are better than the majority of F 1.4s at half the price. And you're talking about, the light difference. I'm not worried about the light difference because I now have IBIS. So the difference in light gathering is irrelevant. And the difference in depth of field is near on irrelevant. Yet when I first used the 50mm 1.8, it was like, I actually am not sure what's going on here. Why is this so extraordinary? I seriously had not seen something like that in a 35mm. But honestly, I got the lens. This is how crazy I am. I get the lens, I unpack it, I stick it on my Z7, I walk down the alleyway behind the Photoshop and I start doing what I do. And I'm just like, I've never seen anything like I made a video about it and it still completely blew my mind.
Dude, I don't know if this is going to show up or not, but that's
beautiful.
My self-portrait in the Z7 II with the 105 macro. That lens is $1,000.
That's a self-portrait, did you say?
That's it. Yeah, go on my Instagram. You guys will see it. But pretty much, I'm looking at myself in this girl's eyeball.
Oh, so, I see. I thought it was your eyeball. It was a very feminine-looking eyeball. Yep.
Oh, she's got a very feminine eyeball.
Yeah, no, we can't really see you in that, but I have seen it on your Instagram feed. And a shout out to everybody. Jump on these guys' feeds, like their channels, like their Instagrams, like anything you can find. I think I put links down below to jump to their stuff. Just give them love. Although I've noticed, Ricci, you're just going crazy right now, girlfriend. You're just going nuts on your channel. That's so good.
I've gained 3,000 subscribers in like 2 days. Which is crazy. So obviously,
I chatted with you about 4 days ago, going, "Congratulations, you're almost there," and then it's like. And then you're like, that's so good.
We went straight through it. So yeah,
I love it. I love it.
It's like I said in like my latest video, I honestly can't thank you guys, like, and the people watching this stream and just the community as a whole. I honestly can't thank you. I keep getting messages where people are like, they're surprised that I still don't understand that my videos are very good. And I don't. Like, as far as I'm concerned, I'm still a person who makes YouTube videos with like 100 subscribers, right? To me, this was never going to happen. It was just a case of I was going to make some videos and I might keep making them. And it just turned into something completely different. And, I can only ever thank you guys for that because it's amazing. And, I would have never thought that I'd be having a conversation with somebody in Australia and New York at the same time. Like
It's bloody brilliant, and we all feel the same. And man, we love what you do, and we love that we've got this kind of line through to Nikon and everything about it. And your videos are awesome because they're so detailed and there's so much information.
And I just want to show people what stuff does, right? Like there's sometimes there's so much confusion, and some people say one thing, another person says one thing, and I just want to, this is what it does.
Yeah.
Whatever you think of that and whatever you want to go and do with it, that's perfectly fine. But this is what it does. Like that's what's really important.
Yeah. But I don't think you realize what you did, Ricci. So during the Z hate era, I'll call it, it was tough. And a lot of people who were Nikon users like myself, who couldn't find resources on the Z series or anything about it. And people just kept telling me, like, you gotta check out this guy, Ricci. And you were the only one adding as a support or even a resource when everyone just spent their energy hating on the brand to get clicks. You were in it going, oh, you already own a Z6? Well, here's some better autofocus modes. Here's things you can do with it you didn't know you could do. Here's what you want to look for out of this. And your setting that means that. And I think adding a support system to anybody, no matter what the brand, is a huge asset. And you did it honestly, you did it extremely knowledgeably, and quite frankly, like, you were needed and you were at the right time. So from this pro in Brooklyn, thank you for doing what you did, because I don't think this whole thing would have tied together. Who else would I bitch to about the Z9 until I found out what it was?
We've had some good conversations. Yeah, but thank you for that.
I appreciate it, man. Oh my God, guys.
Somebody's talking here in the link about, okay, the Z lenses are great, but they're all bigger and heavier. I'm sure, Seth, you'd like to talk about the fact. I mean, what my response would be, and yeah, but they're probably better.
They're not heavy.
So what do you want?
A lot of that size comes down to compensation for breathing.
Yep.
It is quite difficult to you've all seen cine lenses that are parfocal and don't breathe. So, Nikon could make lenses smaller, but the number one rule of optics is if you want a great lens, make it big.
Yeah.
So it's the
look,
thing to do.
I'd prefer my 50mm 1.2 to just be like, I'm not going to call it perfect, but it's basically perfect. I'd prefer that. I'd prefer that than it being, spending $4,000 and it not being like, and sure, it might be an extra, I don't know, 300 grams, but I'm a photographer. I make beautiful images for a living. Where do I want to go? Closer to perfection or further away? It's an easy one for me.
Yeah. I'll say this about the 1.2, the 50 1.2. The Z9 still recognized faces when it was out of focus, and not the other Zs weren't doing that so easily. That's how much better the autofocus got. I mean, it's banana.
Well, there's more stepping motors and so on. Like, they're adding more focusing motors into the lenses and so on, aren't they, Ricci?
So they can they completely remove like exposure from autofocus, which is like one of the things that I always used to talk about, was that if like your picture was, or if your exposure was way too dark or way too bright, like the camera couldn't find your subject, and you had to turn off apply settings to live view for you to be able to focus. On a Z9, it doesn't matter. Like, the actual setting of apply settings to live view does not exist anymore. There's two other options that replace it, because you have a lot more customization around what the camera shows you, but basically the autofocus is separate from your exposure. So there are still some situations where you can force it to technically affect your exposure if you were using like a 15 stop ND or something like that, but generally you don't have to worry about it.
Thank you so much, Darcy. That's amazing. And Kenan. Ricci, I'm very aware it's getting late and you've got like a 4:37 a.m. start, which is in about 4 hours and 3 minutes. I know you're a young man. That would horrify me at my point in life. So I think for the sake of your sanity and having a good day tomorrow, doing what you've got to do, we should probably start to wind this up. It's been amazing. I would love to do it again sometime. Is there any last minute questions or thoughts or anything before we disassemble the Nikon guys for a second?
I mean, from me, it's just like I said, really, just thanks a lot, really, just to you guys as well. Like Seth, like we've had some great conversations. And Matt, the videos that you put together, and just adding to the community have been fantastic. There was, I said to Seth once, and I said to him that I had a great story about Seth. And I said I was going to save it for a live. So the story that I have about Seth was that, you know, if we went back like a couple of years ago, I'm going to be completely honest, I wouldn't know who Seth was. And this is like, I wouldn't expect that people would know who I was like a couple of years ago. Like things changed, right? So the way that I got to find out about Seth was through a recommendation. And that recommendation wasn't from just anybody, it was from Joe McNally, right? And I know that Seth and Joe are great friends, but a lot of you guys might not know that in the UK, we still do a lot with Joe. He's going to be over in a couple of weeks with us here in the UK as well. And like, this was just as like COVID was starting, just as we like people were needing to do like streaming, all that type of stuff. And we were in a conversation with Joe, and he literally went, you know who the best person is? Like legit the best person to get in contact for anything that's like video streaming related, like setting you up. You need to talk to this guy called Seth Miranda. And I was like, okay, like Joe's like really bigged you up here. He's really like throwing you under the carpet. And I was just like, okay. So went and did a little bit of research, and then like, dude, like your stuff was amazing. Like followed you on Instagram, like your portrait stuff was crazy. And I just, you know, ever since then, it's like I met Seth because Joe McNally recommended that I check you out. And like, that is like one of the biggest accolades for me. So yeah.
That's nuts. I remember doing a Nikon UK live stream, and I have to tell you, the UK people are just dead. There's like no, I could not make that crowd talk. I couldn't get them to get rowdy. I was like, It was so bizarre to me. And I think Ricci was the one that was like, Seth, it's just how UK people are. Just keep going.
It's just how the UK is, man. It's just how the UK doesn't have like people from Brooklyn, right? So
yeah, look, I don't want anybody from, I don't wish Brooklyn people on anyone else in the world. Trust me, I leave them here. But I mean, look, I can't tell you how many people recommended Ricci to me beyond belief. And then Matt Irwin one day tags me in a video, and I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? And I watched this video, and I was like, you know what? This guy has a level head. That's really weird. I don't see that often. And then I watched this whole channel, and that's when I reached out to Matt. I was like, we should go live. We should go live right now. Let's go do it. So it's been great. And I love that this industry was a community when I started. I feel like it lost its way. And I feel like community's finally coming back. The toxicity is dying down. The tribalism is fading away. And I mean, we're talking from across the entire world right now to a chat room of 1,000 people who one of them clicked unlike. And,
and I tell you something weird about that, Seth. That's been up there since I put the feed up 10 hours ago, and I don't understand it. We hadn't even done anything yet.
It was probably like that bald guy. It was probably the bald guy, whatever.
Yeah, probably.
Oh my gosh.
Oh well, gentlemen, it's been amazing, and I great comments about community. Like, you know, when you start this thing, you feel very alone, and obviously we're all in different. Like we literally could not be further apart. It takes 24 hours for me to fly to London. It takes 19 hours for me to get to New York. Like really, we have got the world embraced here right now. I love this community, and one of the main reasons I started a channel was because photography can be a pretty solitary life. I run my own business, my own photographic business. I've done it for 30 years. To have you guys in my corner on my channel, never would have dreamt of such a thing. I love that we are part of building this, and I look forward to what the future holds. It's a very, very bright future, and I want to thank you guys, and I want to thank Nikon for delivering. So 2022 is going to be so much fun, and we've got so much stuff that we're going to be able to talk about and go through. So I look forward to it. All right. Well, we better, young man, let you get some sleep. And thank you so much for being up at 12:30 at night in the UK Isles. And we will let you go, and we'll see you again sometime. And thank you for all the Z9 love you've been throwing out to the world. You deserve everything that's happening in your world. So thank you.
There's plenty more to come.
Anyone that's watching this after we're live, just write down in the comments if you'd want to see this again, what topics you'd like us to talk about, because I'm pretty sure we can figure this out another time. Yeah. I've never seen like a chat room blow up to 1,000 that quickly. So, whoa. Thank you guys so much for watching. Follow everybody on this panel if you can, but write a comment down below. Let us know if you'd want to see this again and what you would want to see again, because maybe we can formulate something else. Yep. We're in different time zones, so there's only like 1 hour of the day we all synchronize and we're like coherent.
Yeah.
So
I am going to come to the Northern Hemisphere as soon as I'm allowed to. And then, I don't know, the three of us should just sit either in New York or London and do something. I don't know. We'll do something.
Tell Nikon to put us all on a thing and do a thing with a thing.
Yeah, let's do a thing with a polar bear or something.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
With a polar bear.
Oh my God.
Polar bear or I don't know. Whatever we can think of something between us. All right, Mister. Yeah. We should let you go, honestly.
Sure thing. It's been great, guys.
I mean, you can stay as long as you like. I'm not trying to, of course not, but I'm very aware of how late it is for you.
Yeah. I'm just checking if there's any other questions coming in.
There's about 5. I reckon there's literally about 5,000 questions in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to kill a couple, no one knows about firmware for the Z6 or 7 II yet. Nobody knows anything about it yet. I'm pretty sure all resources were allocated to the Z9 launch. Nikon put all their chips on the Z9 and it paid off. So let's see what happens after this. I'm sure technology will trickle somewhere, some way. But in my opinion, while we will see firmware updates for 6.2 and 7.2, I really think 6.3 and 7.3 will be the bodies to watch. And you guys can just keep on putting your wish list out there. The more you guys talk about what you want on social, like Twitter or in comments on Nikon videos, the more they might come to fruition. There's things they don't even, think of themselves. So be vocal out there, but be reasonable. Jeez.
I mean, I always had this pipe dream about the medium format, and people are asking. I don't think anyone in this room can comment on that. So all I can do is continue to comment on it and just say it's a dream of mine, and it's a dream. That's all there is to it.
I just want a rangefinder style retro camera. Give me the Nikon rangefinders. That's what I want.
And obviously next year's, we've got new bodies next year, and I expect to see at least one sort of Z6, Z7 level, and maybe Z8 if that even exists, and definitely 1 or 2 entry level. So there's plenty more going to be happening next year. This is the beginning of an exciting new chapter for sure.
Yeah, it's not like Nikon are going to launch a Z9 and then just stop, right?
Nah. I can't wait. Like this is like, okay, we've gotten to this level. Now we're going to just keep going up again. Like it's nuts. It's nuts. And we've got, and the fact that we've now got a full range of like glass, by mid next year, I'd say we're going to have almost all of the, all the way from fully wide out to really long, pretty covered. That means we're going to start to get into more interesting and exotic glass over the next couple of years. So really there's, in a way, we've done the hard yards. Now fun times ahead. That's how it feels to me. So
I think for a lot of photographers, like if you ordered a Z9, if you're lucky enough to get some of the first ones that are available, like that's your camera for years, right?
Absolutely.
You're set. Like people, I still know people who shoot with D4s and D3s and
know. Mine both still work. My F5 still works. So they all still work. They're they are built.
I think me and Ricci can both agree. Anyone who bought a D7200 will die with a D7200, but they'll tell you how everything is wrong in a flagship camera. They will tell you what they did wrong in every $6,000 camera body while they hold on to their D7200. That is every convention I've ever been to.
Somebody's asking here about the actual release or shipping date of the Z9. I suppose it's probably a bit of a moving target, but probably sometime in December.
Adorama is saying on their site, they're saying mid-December ship.
There you go.
But I mean, that depends on how many they got in.
Yep.
And NPS members always get first crack. So if you're an NPS member and you chose your retailer, the pre-orders go in order of the NPS first. Just so you know.
Yeah. Awesome. All right.
We got to call it.
Any last minute things, or should we wrap this, gentlemen? You're amazing and you're strong. Ricci, I want you to be able to focus your camera tomorrow. Although you've got the Z9, you don't really, it just does it for you now, doesn't it really?
I don't need to. I did see one question. Someone asked about, did it change how I use focusing for like birds in flight? It has, because like generally for like birds in flight and the way that I shoot wildlife, like I always used to rely on like dynamic or group in my D850. I'm just, as a side note, I've never really been a fan of 3D tracking. Like I never used 3D tracking in my D6, my D850. I'd always stick to either group or like dynamic. And the Z9 is like the first camera where I use 3D tracking or auto area. Like it has changed. I still use back button focus. So I was still focused from my AF on button. I'm not gonna change that. That is definitely something that I would still do. But generally my style of shooting has definitely changed 100%. And I'll once the Z9's out, I do plan on doing like a similar video to what I did with the autofocusing one for Z6 and Z7. I'll do one for Z9 because there's just so much stuff that's different. And there's so many settings that you have to really make sure that you have right to get the best out of it. You can't really just turn it on.
All right. Sorry, Seth.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure you're going to do the videos on like your best practices settings for stuff on the Z9 or whatever. So if you're not subscribed to Ricci, subscribe to Ricci. He'll get you through your setups. But other than that, I think you'd be surprised what your already existing Z cameras can do if you just check out his channel. You'd be really surprised. I mean, medium format would be dope.
I got some of my best like shots of kingfishers in flight with the Z9, but I also got some amazing shots of kingfishers in flight with my Z7 and my Z7 II. And there, I see loads of people that you can't use like Z7 and Z7 II for wildlife, and I've never really understood that because that was my main camera for wildlife, and I've been pretty successful with it. So yeah, I think some people just need to spend a little bit more time to figure out how the AF system really works to get the best out of it. That always helps to know your camera.
Amazing. Well, as we hit the 1 hour, 35-minute mark, we've almost made 100 minutes. You guys are legends. I think Ricci actually ordered his breakfast, which will probably be arriving under his door any second now, and he won't get to sleep at all. So if we're not going to let you go to let you sleep, we're going to let you go to eat so you can start your day. Yeah. You are epic. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We'll see you again online. All of us love your work. Thanks, Seth. Bringing some New York to the world. All right, gents. Love your work.
See you soon.
See ya.
Peace.